Please, we're on air now. Sorry. Smooth 98.1. Love music, love life. I'm Ayo Myro Essay. It is time for us to go through today's national news headline stories in our newspaper review show. It's freshly pressed 981. I'm not alone here. I have the company of Devo Okore. Good morning, Devo.
Good morning, Lagos. Good morning, AY. Cool. The beginning of SWAT.
The beginning of SWAT. Thank you very much, Devo. You can find Devo at Devo Okore on Twitter. We also have Ikemesit joining us via telephone. Morning, Ikemesit. Excellent. You can find Ikemesit at George Ike on Twitter. Please also tweet at us at Smooth981FM if you'd like to be a part of the conversation. And you can also send us a WhatsApp message on 0809 444 0981. All right, we go on to our first story. And Devo, I'll be starting with you. Full report here from this day newspaper. The headline reads, Presidential panel accepts 5-point demand of #EndSARS protesters. The Presidential Panel on Police Reforms has agreed to the 5 points demand of protesters against police brutality, which included halting use of force against protesters and unconditional release of arrested citizens. Other demands include justice for the victims of police brutality, including payment of compensation, as well as, we talked about the 5 points, 5 for 5, that protesters had said had to be fulfilled before protests would be called off. Please take us through this story.
Well, this came yesterday with the insistent pressure from the clamor from this newly formed youth protest that was taking place, and they had put forward their demands, of which included an end to the police brutality, which immediately was called in by halting the use of force against protesters. One, which we had seen various incidences in Lagos, Abuja, and some other states, especially in Abuja, where it was clear the police were throwing fire hydrants, tear gassing, and even soldiers were brutalizing some of the protesters at some points. Now, other demands included justice for the victims who had faced police brutality. 3, and then 4, including the payment or compensation to those who had been brutalized from the SARS occurrences, encounters. And then lastly, the increase in the payment of the police force, as well as undergoing psychological and psychotherapeutic testing evaluation. The president did, the panel did agree to these, they're ceded to them. And as you know, the governor of Lagos State was also in Abuja, like he said, that he would meet the president on behalf of the protesters, and of which the government did respond that they were looking at those issues likewise.
Yeah.
Now, the meeting held with stakeholders convened by the IG of police, that's Adamu, following the directives of the president on the dissolution of SARS, did contain members of, because remember, in their former agreement, they did say that they would host a stakeholders meeting that would include a wide portion of people who had contributed to this. So it included, one, the government, the federal government, also included the police, also members of the National Human Rights Commission, and then a multi-stakeholder forum attended by leaders and representatives of civil society organizations, activists from the entertainment industry, as well as the EndSARS campaigners and development partners. Now, hopefully, they are looking into some of these demands and how they can push them forward. The IG has asked that the campaigners exercise some level of patience to enable them bring some of these demands to pass, especially where it concerns addressing those who have been brutalized by the force. And one thing I would say is this: is I think Nigeria has seen a new day, not just as a country, but the youth have seen some sense of opportunity or power that they wield if they come together.
Mm.
Because it's unfortunate that it had to take a protest nationwide to get the federal government to begin to listen and talk to them, which shows you the systematic breakdown and failure in governance. Because what you see is that even though the first statement from the IG that they should halt SARS, there were still actions, extrajudicial actions taking place, not just uh, with the protesters, but also in various locations within the country, which shows you that the system that we run has a lot of gaps and loopholes. However, many people have asked what is the end game. And what I like is even if you check some of the tweets and some of the messagings, the youths refuse to leave. Some have even said they will continue today until they get their demands.
Yeah, I
But
experienced it.
some have also said that if the government is now responding to them, maybe because they cannot stay there in continuum. Maybe there's time for them to form some form of a youth democratic party, and which this is good. In some, I think it was in Calabar, the government tried to induce them in one way, and they chased them away, saying, "We don't want your money, your Yahoo
Uyo,
boys."
Akwa Ibom, yeah.
Uyo, yes. So with this understanding and their rise above the usual sentiments of religion, ethnicity, and even social status, they can sustain this and form a body, an organized body that will enable them to begin to bring about, realize
Well, talking about, let me just speak
some
to
of
the
the
organized
needs.
body you
Yes.
mentioned. Do you think, as some people have said, one of the success factors of these protests is because they don't have a leader? So if there's no one who is going into negotiations, speaking on their behalf, but when they have an organized body, as we've seen in the past, sometimes one person
I commend the youth. However, it has to be structured in the fullness of time. This not having a leader is a rallying point.
Okay.
At the end of the day, even them they're meeting on a daily basis because many of them are unemployed and some of them are employed. You can't sustain that. However, you can find an organized fashion to sustain this pressure.
Yes.
So, for example, instead of blocking the roads every day, which has stressed the point, you can find a location nationwide in different locations where you can all meet, just like everybody meets on Sunday or on Friday in one name or the other, and speak to yourselves, create leaders amongst yourself or representatives, because this is the actual meaning of Congress.
Yeah.
Meet together in Congress, speak to yourself with everybody with these ideals that you have found, that nobody is above the other person, and marshal out some of the demands and how you want to address them. Remember, it's not just police that's the issue.
Yes.
There are many other issues that affect bad governance within this country. And I'm saying this so that the youth not lose the traction that they have gained.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Talking about the 5-point agenda, one of the key points was the disbandment of SARS, and also what the police had promised to reconstitute another body to replace SARS. And they did this very quickly. The Inspector General of Police, Mohammed Adamu, has set up a new police outfit to take over from the disbanded SARS. They've named it SWAT. It's called Special Weapons and Tactics Team, and they will fill the gaps arising from the dissolution of the defunct SARS. Now, Ikemesit, what he said, and this article gives a breakdown of how they hope to ensure that the men who are recruited into this new unit go through psychological tests, medical fitness, as well as go through proper training before they're absorbed into SWAT. It doesn't seem to satisfy a number of the young people who have called or who have championed this reform. Please take us through this story, break it down, and tell us what you think.
Certain kind of approach to policing, which when you square with not only what the stated intention of SARS was, but also sort of what it morphed and evolved into, it doesn't exactly correct. There doesn't seem to be a natural evolution from, being an anti-robbery squad to, being a special weapons and tactics squad, where essentially you're intervening in high pressure situations like, a hostage taking or kidnappings or very pressing live and fast moving events. But away from the philosophy of it, how the IGP imagines this would be that personnel from police commands in various parts of the country will meet in 3 locations: one in Nasarawa for the north, one in Oshun for the south, and one in Rivers for the east. The southeast and the south, where and this personnel would go through training, psychological assessment, and also a very rigorous selection process to ensure that the best possible people are selected for this process. Now, to the larger points that you've made, why this doesn't seem to have dampened the momentum of the protesters and satisfied a lot of their demands is that when you are engaging with a party like the police and the Inspector General of Police and the federal government in general that made commitments in 2017 and 2018 and 2019 to do work in terms of reforming these units, and nothing happened, listening to another set of commitments and platitudes on the side of that party isn't going to be enough. So one of the things that, and I have been speaking with and quite a number of the people who are behind this movement. I have, in fact, I should, at this point state that I have been involved in, some of the planning, some of the organizing of the protests, some of the, backroom support in terms of legal help for arrested protesters and all of
All right.
a movement that I'm intimately acquainted with. One of the things that, the protesters would like to see with the timelines. So you have this ostensibly disbanded SARS immediately. There have been known incidents where these people have still been known to operate, even though they were disbanded late on Sunday. When are they going to get off the streets? When will SWAT be set up? When will this training and selection process begin? How involved would outside third parties, those stakeholders that Devo referred to, right, in the first story, how involved will they be in the process to ensure that it's properly managed? We don't have a situation where the police goes off with its homework, it does its own work, it comes back, and we have to be at the receiving end of another round of mismanaged incidents before we begin to have this conversation. It would be nice for not just the conversation, but the execution and the implementation of a lot of these recommendations to involve key stakeholders within the civil society ecosystem, if possible, international partners, because this has become a global movement in many ways.
Yeah.
To ensure that what is replacing SARS is nothing like what SARS was. And I think that's the key thing. So it would be nice to see timelines, it would be nice to see concrete plans, and not just announcements and press releases and commentary and meetings and behind the scenes movements. So while that is good, and this announcement is a step in the right direction, and this is indicative of the right kind of thinking, right?
Yeah.
More still needs to be done. And clearly, the appetite on the streets is that people want to see that happen live in real time before we begin to, commit to those assurances and then we get off the street. So until that happens, I think there's still a lot of life, still to play.
All right.
With respect to the protest movement.
All right.
And know that this would clearly not be enough. Good, but not enough.
All right, so good, but not enough. And I think what also convened or what hasn't augured well is the fact that despite the 5-point agenda being absorbed, we still have reports of soldiers, security agencies brutalizing protesters at protest spread. And this is one of the things they said they'd agreed to in the 5 for 5. Vincent from Adiba says, SARS to SWAT is the same thing as NEPA to EK EDC. We really need reshoving, reorientation, training of the Nigerian police. The ongoing protests will be a blessing in disguise to the police personnel. And then Saratu from Otta, Ogun State says, please keep saying that the police force is under. People keep saying that the police force is underpaid. I don't think that's really the problem, because even if their salaries are multiplied by 6, the money they extort from poor Nigerians seem to have a special taste. All right, let's move on to our next story here. And Divo, I'll come to you. It is the special fund that's been created by the governor of Lagos State, who has been quite vocal and I dare say supportive with regards to the protest. Indeed, he joined the protesters yesterday before he made his way to Abuja to present their letter to the president, as well as have a meeting with the president and the IG of police. Lagos State Governor Babajide Sanwo-Olu meets Buhari IGP, sets up 200 million naira trust fund for victims, is the headline from the Guardian newspaper. Please give us the details of this story and the outcome of what has happened.
Well, for those who have been watching or have been part of the protest, you would have seen the frantic efforts by the Lagos State government through the person of the governor, Babajide Sanwo-Olu, in trying to get some level of attention from the protesters, which was very tough. It started the day before he came over to the Lekki toll gate, of which they, in some way, they listened to him, but he was still booed. All right. It must be said, because that was the energy that was given, that he was not going to do what he said. It continued with another meeting, because he told them that he was going to meet the president to carry the cries and their protests and their prayers. Yesterday, the protesters as well assembled at the government house, of which he addressed them before flying, and he told them that he would carry their prayers to him. But in the meantime, he did state, because many of them did state that even though he was talking, that many of the protesters were still being manhandled and brutalized even in Lagos. So what he then did was he stated that a panel of inquiry would be set up to with members of the security agencies and representatives of the protesters to look into the allegations of human rights abuses against SARS operatives within the state. And then he also said that about 200 million was already allocated from the Lagos State government to compensate those who were victims of these protests, compensate the victims and some of their families where lives were lost, etc. In Oyo State, remember there was a vandalization that took place within the Shaun of Ogbomoso's palace. The governor, Seyi Makinde, released about 100 million for repairs. All in all, these are what I call them stopgap moves by governments to try and see if they can find some lasting calm to the tensions and the protest that is ongoing. As you can see, the youths are not backing down. They seem to have found their voice. However, like I said, government, these knee-jerk reactions will not do. The knee-jerk reactions, yes, may try and sway them. However, government needs to know that if they have failed in delivering some of the yearnings of Nigerians as a whole, this is the kind of reactions that you will get. So it's a call to duty that not just the governor, we want to see where are those reps, where are the state assembly reps who represent these people. It's unfortunate that now the people had to come out in the form of the youths to speak for themselves. That's the job of the representatives. That's the job of those at the state assembly representatives. That's the job of the local government, the councillors, the ward councillors. That's the job of the federal representatives and the senators who represent these people. That's why you were paid those humongous amounts.
You know, thank you for mentioning this, Divo. I said it a few days back that I do think that the quiet from the House of Reps and senators have been quite, it's deafening.
It's also damning. Yes. It's also a great judgment of their failure, because now the youths have said it amongst themselves that if we pay these people so much and we don't get results, now that we come together, we seem to be getting a listening ear, then we don't need them. And it's unfortunate that they had to come to that level of understanding. So it's a complete call to everyone to wake up, to realize that maybe some of those moves that you have made, maybe following this set of politicians and their ideologies and thinking of money politics, it can't work for you and it shouldn't work for you. That's the way we want our citizens to start to think, so that they start to take the right decisions about the way they want to be governed and who will govern them.
All right, thank you. Outrage as president nominates partisan aide as electoral umpire. This day, a sense of outrage yesterday greeted President Muhammadu Buhari's nomination of one of his media aides, Miss Loretta Onoche, as a national commissioner representing the South-South in the Independent National, and I say the word again, Independent National Electoral Commission, INEC, with social critics saying it was a provocative assault on the 1999 Constitution as altered. Ikeme states it's been proven that Ms. Onoche is actually a card-carrying member of the APC. Please take us to the story.
Senior lawyers, key members of civil society organizations are saying is that Ms. Onoche is not just any kind of media aide to the president. She's a card-carrying member of the All Progressives Congress. Reportedly, she's registered at Ward 5 on Ichaolo 9 Aniocha North local government of Delta State, and that invalidates her nomination for consideration to be an INEC commissioner, because paragraph 14 of the third schedule of the 1999 Constitution as amended specifically prescribes anybody involved in partisan politics from holding office as a member of INEC. So there's a wider perspective to this, in that the president has committed to ensuring that one of his, at least publicly committed to ensuring that one of his legacies, right, is the fact that elections are free, fair, and they are seen to be, free, fair, and impartial, right? And this nomination is a step in the completely opposite direction from that. In sort of more narrower legal circles, the conversation overnight has been, how do you define who is involved in partisan politics? Some lawyers would say you need to have been registered with a political party. It appears Ms. Onoche fits the bill. Some would say that just the fact that you are appointed into certain roles. So it's debatable if a minister is involved in partisan politics. But if you are a political aide, I mean, if you're a media aide, you're in the weeds. You're mixing it up with members of the opposition. You are helping to communicate the government's position on things. And anybody who follows Ms. Onoche on social media knows that she is not shy. Of picking up her gloves and going after anyone who goes after the president. How do you expect someone who has done that for 5 years now? 5 years and counting, right? To dispassionately discharge any form of duty as an INEC commissioner. So that's where the challenge and the quandary is. And it's bold that in the era where we are, many of us are protesting against not just police brutality, but also official impunity. The presidency can actually have the courage, and it really, really takes quite a bit of.
It does, I must say.
So to send a nomination of this kind to the National Assembly, and even some lawmakers, the Senate Minority Caucus, are complaining, and it says something when, even politicians find some of your more overtly political moves to be this ballsy. So in that sense, Onoche's confirmation, right, if it gets to a hearing, right, would be easily one of the most dramatic and definitely one of the most controversial.
That's if the president does not withdraw the nomination.
To a hearing, it will be one of that. I don't see how any of this, I don't see how the presidency comes out of this in a good or a respectable light, and just that thinking alone, I think just makes one scratch the head as to how this left his desk in the first place.
All right, thank you very much. Ikeme said, good morning, Aya. It's nice that the 5 points have been absorbed But as part of the police reform, the removal of AK rifles from the police corps, Nigeria is not a war-torn country, says Martins. Tayo Fomaja says it would be very difficult to accept the introduction of SWAT by the IGP because he's a product of the system he's trying to change. I am not impressed. We'll take this further into Lagos Talks 981 because I do know that a number of people want to talk about this. So that's an opportunity for you to call us and express your views. 2021 budget, how 5.2 trillion naira deficit will be financed by the finance minister. Premium Times reports that the Nigerian government will borrow from domestic and foreign sources, including multilateral and bilateral finance organizations to finance the 2021 federal budget deficit. Devo, what's your take on this? No boring.
I wish we had time for this story. However, what I would say is this, because people do need to really understand the real issue at hand, because I don't want us to get lost in the numbers. But basically, the finance minister, Zainab Ahmed, did in a public presentation yesterday in Abuja on explaining and the delivery of the 2021 budget, which was termed as a budget of economic recovery and resilience. Well, we know that names do nothing. She did say that there is already a 5.2 trillion naira deficit, which means that for what they had planned for, they don't have the money, or they don't have where the sources would come from. So what she said, that the federal government to bridge that gap would be borrowing from domestic and foreign sources, as well as multilateral and bilateral agencies. Now, about 2.14 trillion would be taken from loans from domestic and foreign sources, while about 709 billion will be from multilateral and bilateral groups, as well as 205 billion, which was earmarked as proceeds from the privatization of public enterprises. Now, just a quick rundown. Now, with all the activity and the issues that have been going on in the country, I'm sure many people actually did miss the budget presentation. And the question would be, what budget are we talking about? Have we even delivered in terms of performance on the 2020 budget, which of the last year 2019 budget only performed like 40%? As of what month are we in? This is quarter three.
October,
I'm sure they haven't gone beyond 20% in the 2019 budget. And
We're
now,
looking forward.
yeah, we're looking forward. Yes, they've adjusted the budget calendar, but you see, all that is what's the word? All that is all movement and no action at the end of the day, because there's a real issue at ground. Now, just before I state the issue, some of the assumptions, okay, with an oil benchmark at $40. That's the budget benchmark, and exchange put at 379. Now, these are all to show you some of the assumptions based on the budget in which will play out in the medium-term expenditure program. However, the core and the hardest issue with our budget is not even the funding, but it is the structure and the makeup of this budget. I don't have the figures right here in front of me, but it is clear that we have a debt situation. And debt situation means that we're using more than half of our budget revenue to pay off debt. Our indebtedness is high. And when you scream about this, they'll tell you that, oh, our debt to GDP is still manageable. It's like 20%, 25% compared to other nations that it's hitting 50, 80, etc. Well, that is a point. But the real point that is not disclosed is the debt to the revenue generation. We're not making enough to be able to take care of our expenditure. So what it calls for is, even though you want to, because I expect this budget to be geared towards capital expenditure, that infrastructure, that which has long-lasting and a return to the Nigerian people, even if we have to borrow for it. That's where taking loans and borrowing makes sense. But that we are taking loans to fund consumption, to fund recurrent expenditure, it's the worst mistake that you can. It's like mortgaging your future on top of nothing. It's like going into debt for something that you will not reap for in the long run. And Nigerians need to actually take a look at this and be sure that we are moving in the right direction. If government has, yes, they have been making some moves to improve revenue generation in terms of taxing, in terms of creating new areas, in terms of what do you call it? the efficiencies of some of the of the fund generating agencies. However, there's a major loophole
All
that
right.
has to do with some of the major leakages in terms of subsidies, in terms of the size of government.
Mhm.
We cannot afford the size of government if you're earning this small.
Thank you very much. You did say you needed a lot more time for
Yeah.
this. Unfortunately, we cannot take any more because our time is up. But don't forget to join us at 9 o'clock for Lagos Talks 981, where we will break down the first story with regards to what do Nigerian youths really want. They've agreed to the 5-for-5 5-point agenda, and they have reconstituted. Well, they've disbanded SARS and now have SWAT, and people are still not satisfied. What do we really want? Devo at Devo Kore on Twitter. We have Ikemesit at George Ike on Twitter, and we are Smooth 981 FM on Twitter. Next up is Locker Room 981 with Tega.
Make tomorrow better today. Choose ARM Pensions.
Hello, this is Jessica Bongos, and you're listening to the Smooth Breakfast Show.
Huh?
Let me tell you this way.
Is the chemist still on?